Shalom, everyone. Today is April the 4th, 2022. We are studying today Parshat Metzora. It is a difficult Parsha,
Not
um,
amazing?
a Parsha that deals with, in addition to other things, all sorts of skin eruptions and genital things, stuff that we get very squeamish about. But the thing that I'm going to focus on is the least squeamish of all of these things, and that has to do with um, what is probably fungus in your house, mold and mildew in your house. It's not a particularly appetizing topic. Um, but as you no doubt have learned in our classes in the past, even things that are related to distant and remote uh, ideas actually can be made quite relevant to today. And so with that, I want to share the text with you, and the text is as follows. Here we go. So this is from chapter 14, chapter 14, verse 33, and I'm going to put up the text in a second. Hey, Lana. Okay, so here it is. So, and this is, I'm using it's called Plagues on Your House. A plague on your house. Um, the text from Vayikra Yudalid. God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when you enter the land of Canaan, that I am giving you as a holding, and I place an affliction of Tzara'at on a house in the land of your holding, there shall come the one whose house it is, and report to the priest, saying, something like an affliction has been seen on me on the house. Then the priest is to command that the house be cleaned before the priest enters to look at the affliction, so that nothing that is in the house becomes tameh. After that, the priest may enter to look at the house. He is to look at the affliction, and here, should the affliction be on the walls of the house, as greenish or reddish eruptions, with their look lower than the wall, the priest is to go out of the house to the entrance of the house, and is to have the house shut up for 7 days. The priest is to return on the 7th day, and is to look and hear. Should the affliction have spread on the walls of the house, the priest is to command that they pull out the stones on which the affliction is, and throw them outside the city into a tameh place. The house someone shall scrape inside all around, and they are to pour the dried mud that was scraped off outside the city into a tameh place. Then they are to take other stones and bring them in place of the original stones. Other dried mud they are to take and are to replaster the house. Now, if the affliction returns and sprouts in the house after one has pulled out the stones, and after the house is being scraped and after it's being plastered, the priest is to enter and look and hear. Should the affliction have spread in the house, it is acute tzara'at in the house, it is tameh. Then one is to demolish the house, its stones, its wood, and all the dried mud in the house, and one is to take it outside the town to a tameh place. One who enters the house during all the days of its being shut up is to remain tameh until sunset. One lying in the house is to scrub his garments. One eating in the house is to scrub his garments. Now if the priest should enter, and look and hear the affliction is not spread through the house, after the replastering of the house, the priest is to declare the house pure, since the affliction has healed. He is to take, to decontaminate the house, 2 birds, and cedar wood, scarlet of the worm, and hyssop, and he is to slaughter the 1 bird in the earthen vessel over living water. Then he is to take the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet of the worm, and the live bird, and is to dip them in the blood of the slaughtered bird, and in the living water, and is to sprinkle it on the house 7 times. So he is to decontaminate the house with the blood of the bird, and the living water, with the live bird, and with the cedar wood, and with the hyssop, and with the scarlet worm of the worm. Then he is to send free the live bird outside the town toward the open field. When he affects purgation of the house, then is pure. I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to ask you if you're still with me. So evidently, go ahead, Nanette. Yeah.
So, Rabbi and class, I find it really interesting that the priest has this knowledge of different situations. For example, where you're talking about the plagues, fungus on the walls. And also it's very similar to what's happening these past 2 years. I mean, look how people are nervous. You can't go into people's houses. You can't gather. There's a lot of similarities.
Well, absolutely, and in this way, we can make some kind of connection to these very, very remote texts. In that, and we'll just kind of state, that the priest has to be some kind of an expert, both in areas that we now put under the category of medical knowledge, that is, dermatological knowledge for the skin, all sorts of skin eruptions. The priest has to have some kind of expertise. Especially, we saw that, I didn't have the class last week, but you can, if you look at the Parasha, you'll see that there are all sorts of very, very specific symptoms and symptomology for the kinds of skin eruptions that a person, might experience. Similarly, a person in their home may experience this, and I'm sure many of you may have experienced certain kinds of things in your home as well. We in Highland Park especially experience flooding from time to time, especially during more rainy events. People have their basements flooding all the time. If you have an older home, the water will seep up into the walls, and depending on the ability of the house to drain itself or to dry itself, this can actually become quite a nuisance. That you can develop a mold or a mildew in a house, and there are some people that are very, very sensitive to that, and breathing the mold spores and the mildew spores actually may incur some kind of respiratory difficulties. That's not uncommon for people, and that's why a whole industry has developed in terms of mold and mildew. We have this when we had the fire. We had to do a whole mold and mildew remediation of the temple because it's one thing to have a fire. It's another thing when people are spraying water on the fire, and of course the water is to put out the fire, but the water that didn't put out the fire had to drain somewhere, and it didn't drain. A building like ours is not designed to drain, extinguishing water. And so the water is simply pooled, and since the building was dangerous, it just, a pooled water will develop mold fairly quickly. You have to get rid of it fairly quickly in order to prevent it and dry it. And so that was part of our remediation. As I said, I'm sure many of you have that, and mold is not uncommon in a basement, on a wall, in a bathroom, in a carpet, in an entrance, anywhere where there's moisture or other kinds of things. And so that is not uncommon in antiquity either, and in the Middle East. I see, Steve, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
The first couple of sentences you said, you shall remove you shall cleanse the house so that the furniture and stuff doesn't get tamei. I don't have a chumash. What is the Hebrew? Is it cleanse or remove? Because even if you cleanse the house and it stays there, what's left could become tamei.
So here, ufinu et habayit. Ufinu et habayit. Let me just get the... So ufinu et habayit So you clear out the house. It could, in fact, mean something as, you get all the furniture out. And a person in a house, and here, we're not talking about a home architecture the way we understand it today. A house in the biblical era was probably one room. I don't know. I should have gotten a picture of that. One room, maybe with a fire, some kind of hearth, and of course there's no water. There's no running water in the home, and you basically slept in your living room and in your kitchen, and maybe put up a curtain or maybe had some kind of partition to make the one room, to have some kind of privacy between different rooms. But only very, very wealthy people had multi-room homes, multi-chambered homes in antiquity, and in the area that we're talking about, in the Middle East, the Near East, homes are made out of stone, and homes are made out of plastered stone. The walls are plastered because these materials are just very accessible in that area. And to this day, and having just been in Israel, that's the construction materials are basically stone, cement, plaster, and any typical dwelling will be a wall that is a plaster wall, and from time to time these walls will need to be refinished. They crack, they moisture develops, and and the materials are getting better and better all the time, but it's not simple. It's not simple to maintain. Dry, heat, wet, etc. makes all of these things wear and tear. And in addition, you have the fact that dwellings are, for all intents and purposes, I want to put it in air quotes, living places. We live in our space, and our spaces affect our lives. They shape our lives, not only in terms of the basic areas in which we live, but also in terms of memory and in terms of the enclosure of your space, rendering you in these limited circumstances either accessible or inaccessible, pure or impure, because of it. If your home, and here is where I would say it with a, when you discover a mold in your home, it makes you feel icky. Icky is the word, the technical word for impure. It is just an ickiness feeling, and on the deepest anthropological level, you want to A, clean it, and B, I think you want to mark the end of that period of infirmity in your home. So it's not that you will celebrate it, but you will say, it's done. Now it's done. I can go back. I'm assuming that everybody has experienced that. The recent time that I did it, I had some kind of plumbing event, and so what happens in a plumbing event is that water goes on the floor, and you got to get it cleaned up, and they come in, they rip up your bathrooms, they rip up your carpets, and they clean everything, and there's a real science to this. There's a real science to this, and they fumigate everything, they disinfect everything, they really do it, and the best people who do this make it as new. And we have insurance for this, and that's what it's for. And you go in, you buy a new carpet, etc. And then you have the experience of renewal or newness, which is akin to the experience that this individual is going to experience, which is, I had this happen to my house. It was unfortunate. I remediated it, and now I'm better. And the misfortune that happened to my house had ritual dimensions in that it enclosed me with a very low level of impurity, not the impurity that is the highest level, which is the proximity to death. Death is the thing that is like the ultimate impurity. But this is a low level. It's like high level radiation and low level radiation. This is. But from low level radiation, you have to remediate yourself as well. And so what that whole chapter was about is what are the steps that are done, and the rituals that are involved: the slaughter of the bird, the dipping of the bird in the live bird in a blood and whatever, and they fly off, and crimson and wormwood and all that stuff, which I'd love to get into, but it and the details are fascinating. The point is that in antiquity you needed this kind of ritual in order to make the statement, the boundary statement between a state of impurity and a state of purity, and that's a theme that we've seen before. Okay, I have a question here. What is the symbolism meaning of the cedar wood? Yeah, all of that, I think, Bob, all of that has to do with redness, red cedar, red hyssop, and all of that, and for reasons that are not quite understood, at least by me, it's the same way that blood has this detergent effect. These items, which have a natural red tint in them, may have, to our ancestors, had the same symbolic meaning in terms of their, quote unquote, detergent effects. So you basically took a mixture of an actual animal blood and these items, these organic items, and that became the way that you administered these the sprinklings and the cleansing on the home. That's the best I can do on that.
Rabbi?
Yes, go ahead.
Aren't those the same hyssop and cedar or whatever else that was used for the red heifer?
That's correct. And the reason that is given for their use at the red heifer is what I just mentioned, which is that with the red heifer, what you're doing is you're creating a kind of solution that is like the highest concentrate of redness, red stuff. Red stuff, blood, is the detergent. If you concentrate it into the highest form and dilute it in lots and lots of water, then it will have utility in an efficient way for use over a long period of time. And so I think the association of those substances with the color is what this is all about. For we can understand blood and the use of blood, but I admittedly, and I'm making a really strong leap here, a big leap here, that even for our ancestors, the use of blood in many of these rituals may have been a kind of aversion as well. So we have all of this kind of bound up together. Okay, so I want to share. Go ahead, Ilana. Go.
Maybe I missed it. The specific marks are for specific sins. How do you know what did you do wrong exactly?
So this is a great question, and the reason why it's a great question actually leads me into the comment that we have here, which is, and I'll put the screen up in a second, that there really is no reason why this happens. It's not like, we tend to associate the skin disease with the sin of of Lashon Hara, and that's a long-standing tradition. But here, there is no reason for it, and it's just the misfortune that happens to an individual in the course of life, in the course of your domestic life, where things happen, and I mean, that idea though that separates the causality of this, that there's from a kind of a sin or a punishment, that is very important. Let's read what Professor Milgram has to say about this, and he let's see if I'm going to read this comment here. Bright green or bright red eruptions on the walls of the house warrant a 7-day quarantine. If the infection has not subsided after the period of quarantine, the infected stones are removed and replaced, the interior plaster is removed and recoated, and a second quarantine is imposed. If the infection nonetheless persists, the house is demolished. If instead it is healed, the priest performs a ceremonial that is a duplicate of the first-day rite for the purification of cured scale diseased persons. So there's a similarity here between a person who suffers a skin ailment and the house ailment. Spring water containing the blood of a bird, cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson yarn is sprinkled on the house 7 times, and a live bird is released into open country. The live bird takes the impurity out. That's the significance of the bird. It's like your house is impure, and it's like releasing a balloon kind of thing. The bird takes it out with them. Israel's priesthood. This is the main paragraph here. Israel's priesthood has eviscerated the magical and demonic from the rites of the fungus house prevalent in the contiguous cultures, and, as in the case of the scale diseased person, has incorporated them into its overarching symbolic system that proclaims the victory of the forces of life over the forces of death. I translate that meaning, which is that the Torah is really concerned with the world around it as a world that is kind of saturated with magical thinking, and demonic thinking. If you just kind of, if you were to go into the Star Trek Enterprise and beam yourself back 2,000, 3,000 years, and probably not as long as that, you would be in a world where people are very much influenced by magic and the occult and by witches and by potions and by all sorts of attempts to tame the demonic through incantations, magic bowls, and other kinds of things. That was the norm in pre-modern times. And I would say that in certain circles, these things still exert a lot of power over the imagination. We understand magic as illusion and entertainment, like Houdini, for example. But not too long ago, and still some of the things that are vestigial in our culture, like pu and Kanai Nahora and all that, these are left over from magical statements that are to put away the evil eye or demonic impulses, okay? So the Bible is trying to strip any magic from this and make it purely symbolic, okay? Now, Marlene, I see you have a hand up, and there are others here. Go ahead.
Does this indicate that there are local rabbis or priests to come by? How can 600,000 people have a rabbi come over to his house to inspect the mold? And number two, it seems to me that after you start sprinkling blood all over, now you've got all these flies. How does it ever get cleaned up? Okay, so in answer to the first question, we might want to say that the population is quite an exaggeration, but it's presenting us an idyllic kind of situation where there is a whole priestly apparatus that is entrusted with specifically this role. That is to say, you have priests who
do the sacrifices, and they work and live in and around the sanctuary. You have priests that are in charge of your skin department, and you have priests that are in charge of your house department. And if the demand is very high, it's going to take a while to get your Kohen over to the house, the same way that you would, if demand is high for a plumber. But the point is that they interacted with people where they lived, and that's what. So I want to say it in the religious context is that when do you have contact with your Kohen? You have contact with your Kohen when you are most vulnerable, both in your body, in your skin, that which contains you, and in your home, that which contains you. That is to say, the boundary of you to the world, which is your skin, and the boundary of your space to the world space, which is your home. And so it's precisely on those two boundaries, your skin and the walls of your home, that the expert is requested in order to adjudicate, what's your status. The overarching reason for this is because purity and impurity means your ability to access holy things, and the ability for in the process of doing holy things for God to be present among the people. And if God is present, there's life. When God is absent, there's no life. And so these things become a matter of great urgency. The whole issue, it's very foreign to us because we don't think of pollution and purgation with these existential ultimate meaning. We don't when we think about mold in our basement, we don't think that the whole community is imperiled by the fact that we have mold in the basement. We do feel that on our own level that, if we are very sensitive to respiratory issues, our own health is affected, that's for sure. And we do feel the icky factor, that is for sure. But we don't feel that this is going to be in any way detrimental to the whole community. I think in antiquity they did. Nanette, go ahead.
So, Rabbi, I really like what you said before, that there's like different departments of, high priests to take care of the different needs of the community. But hey, Rabbi, so I will speculate they did not have a medical school back then. So who's training all these high priests?
So it's a very good question. That a lot of knowledge is oral knowledge, and it's passed down by tradition. Who trains, we have Kohanim here, who trained you how to do the blessing? Well, your father trained you how to do that. If you are, depending on what your role is in your life, you grow up, doing, if you're a male or a female, you grow up learning to do what your parents do. I often talk about the fact that the kitchen is not only a place of cooking and preparation, but it's a great place that information is transferred from one generation to another generation, and that's how it was done for hundreds of years. That when you watched typically your mother, making whatever it was that she was making, whether it was soup or fish or whatever, and we're coming up to Pesach, where a lot of that is very much a part of, it's the internal culture of a people exists on the oral transmission. Recipes weren't written down till really relatively recently in human history. It was all passed down orally, and so this information, the codes for that, this is a form of a code where the rules are regulated here, but the apprenticeship of, come here, little Kohen, my son, the Kohen, I'm going to show you. You see this on a house? This is a red blotch. This is this kind of thing. This is what you need to do for this. Okay, that's how it goes. Let me just put one more thing here. There was a, what did I do here? So the Mesopotamians attribute fungus houses to demons, the Hittites to its occupants, but Israel to neither. God, as the one and only God, must be the source of all that happens in nature. Yet whereas calamitous events are elsewhere in Scripture ascribed to human disobedience of divine law, in this case there is no such attribution. In other words, it happens. It didn't happen because you sinned. The infection has been diagnosed and treated objectively, in a real sense, scientifically. Human causality has been dismissed. Although God is clearly the author of the fungi, nowhere is it intimated that they are a punishment for sin. The owners must work on the house according to the instructions of the priest, but they never do anything on their own behalf. They do not bring a sacrifice as they would were they themselves inflicted by the disease. Although God punishes sin, this house fungus is not a punishment. So it's just a terrible misfortune that happens, and it happens, and you get over it, okay? And here, just for the sake of our own edification, I wanted to show this particular thing here. Here we go. There's a whole science to this.
We live in an incredibly diverse world, which is yet to be explored. According to some studies, approximately 86% of species still await description. With a potential 2 million species, fungi constitute a significant part of this undescribed biodiversity, as we only know of around 150,000 fungal species. Most described fungal species are microfungi, small, silent, but essential pillars of Earth's biodiversity. In any given ecosystem, a fungus may play one of two very important roles: a plant partner or a caretaker. Some fungi form a partnership with plants called mycorrhizae. They wrap around the plant's root system and significantly increase its surface, which makes plants more efficient in absorbing water and minerals. What do fungi get out of this deal? Sugars. The more a plant can absorb, the more it grows. The more sugars it can produce through photosynthesis, the more food for the fungi. As most fungi are saprophytes and obtain their food by absorbing organic molecules, they represent Earth's great recyclers and caretakers. They feed on dead organisms, grow, and make those nutrients available for other organisms. In fact, as fungi are the only organisms capable of breaking down the rough lining shell of plants, if fungi were to disappear, life on our planet wouldn't be possible due to enormous piles of plant debris. Molds are one of nature's great environmental saprophytes and can be found on practically all living and decaying organic matter. They are small filamentous organisms found almost everywhere, from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Unfortunately, being able to grow on any surface with very little moisture means that they quite often grow in our homes, especially in dark and moist places such as basements, kitchens, and bathrooms. Molds eat and grow on anything containing sugars such as cellulose, food, fruits, wood, drywall, wallpapers, textiles, and they produce airborne spores, a lot of them. It is these spores that most often cause health problems, which can vary from mild irritations, allergies, to systemic fungal infections with serious consequences in people with weakened immunity. 15 years ago, we first-handly experienced a lot of these mold-related health problems, without knowing the cause. A long and expensive investigation pointed the culprit, black mold. This experience gave us the idea and the motivation to form Moldbusters, a company dedicated to studying and affordably removing all kinds of molds. We have started as a humble Ontario business back in 2005, and have since expanded our mold-related services to many territories inside and outside Canada. However, as our services are only as good as mold knowledge, we started cooperation with mycologists and biologists from several universities with the idea to form the largest free repository of information on the biology, ecology, and harmful effects of all kinds of mold species on the internet. The link to our growing mold library is in the description of this video. We are also forming a Moldbusters community, where mycologists and mold experts can share their knowledge and experience regarding the fungal kingdom with you. Here, you will be able to listen to lectures, videos, and share and ask any fungi and mold-related questions or problems you may have. Stay tuned to our channel to be one of the first members of our Mold Busters community. To become an expert in identifying mold in your home, and if you want to learn more about molds and other fungi, check our mold library on bustmold.com and subscribe to our channel.
Okay, so I'm sure that none of you have ever thought about consulting a mold library to discover the species of mold. And I think you may have known, through some reading or, cursory knowledge that without molds and fungi, we would not have life. And this actually makes it very religious in the sense that like we talk about, there's a boundary between life and death. Like I spoke about this past week in the Parasha talk and in Shul, that the whole business with the woman who gives birth, it's because there is the deep anthropological understanding that when there is birth, there's also death, and that so if I just kind of close my eyes and do the mystical leap that I rarely do, but here it's calling me to do this, which is to say that fungi and mold is part of the decomposition process. I don't know to what extent our ancestors really put that together in the sense that they understood decomposition and mold and fungus. It may not be such a big biological leap to understand this, but molds are the things that decompose living things from which you get more living things, right? If you walk into the forest and you see a tree stump, it's already got the molds and the fungi on it, and that is necessary for it to decompose. And there are hundreds of thousands of species of it, etc. And that, I mean, you could get very excited about it if you were so inclined to, especially those of us who like eating mushrooms, right? I once tried to grow my own mushrooms in my home. I was not particularly successful, but the people who grow mushrooms understand that they require certain kinds of environments, and that there are lots and lots of different tasty species of mushrooms, and you could do very well with that. Okay, any observations, any questions, remarks, or reactions to that? Anybody? No? Yeah, go ahead, Nanette.
So, as you know, Rabbi, I just want to remind people, mushrooms are very, very healthy. So when you said there's no life without fungus, you're correct, because if mushrooms are connected with fungus, they're super healthy.
Mushrooms are super healthy, and they have all sorts of immuno benefits to them, and you should have lots of mushrooms in your diet. Okay. So that there, this could go. We could continue in that direction, but I want to take it into a different direction now, which is won't surprise you that the rabbis have their own reactions to this, and here is their comment, Rashi's comment on this passage, which is very fascinating, and he says as follows. In speaking about coming to the land, ki tavo el ha'eretz Canaan, right? Which is a phrase that appears many times in the Torah, and it's almost like an anticipation. There's excitement, right? Whenever we see that phrase, ki tavo, when you get it, especially in the book of Deuteronomy, you're going to get into the land, you're going to plant your fields, you're going to reap your fields, you're going to harvest, you're going to do it, and it's very exciting. So here it's kind of odd. It says, Ki tavo eretz Canaan, when you come into the land, asher ani noten lachem v'natati neged tzara'at, and I'm going to give you some tzara'at. I'm going to give you this plague of leprosy on your house. How wonderful is that? Right? So Rashi says as follows. He's picking up on the sense, that is usually expressed elsewhere with this phrase, saying that there's a Metzora. This is news. It's an announcement. Metzora hi lahem shehen nigaim ba'im alehem. It's an announcement to them that these plagues would come upon them because lifi shehitminu amorayim matmoniot shel zahav bikirot batehem. The Amorites / Canaanites concealed treasures of gold in the walls of their houses during the whole 40 years the Israelites were in the wilderness, in order that these might not possess them when they conquered the land. And in consequence of the plague, they would pull down the house and discover them. So, Kol Arbim Shana Shayu Yisrael B'Midbar V'Yedei Nega Notetza Bayit U'Motzan, which I have to say it's this is a stunning kind of comment. The comment is, okay, I'm going to close the screen. The comment is that the Canaanites in the land are aware that the Israelites in the desert are on their way. And what they do is they are preparing for the eventual conquest by putting all of their valuables, sticking them away in hidden spaces in their homes. They're hiding it in their homes. And the idea then is that if they're hiding it in their homes, they know that they may have to have a temporary evacuation of their homes in order to face the conquest, so that when they return to their homes, they will be able to retrieve their goods. The only thing is, though, that the Israelites, when they conquered the land, they conquered it permanently. And so the idea that they would get a plague on their house actually was good news for them. They perceived it, according to this midrash, it was good news because that enabled them to start a renovation project in their home, which would perhaps yield hidden treasures. Okay, this tells us that from there's the possibility that there's a silver lining in the cloud, because of the more I started looking at this, the more fascinated I became about this whole idea that if you buy a home and you do a renovation in your home, you never know what you're going to discover, whether it's something as benign as a 1930s wallpaper, or in some instances something much more valuable. Okay, so here is a video of that. Okay, take a look at this. All right, and come to your own conclusions as to why this person.
2016, Imgur user Brannick12 shared his amazing discovery with the online community. The 35-year-old DIY enthusiast was finally getting around to revamping his family home, and as he'd already finished the first and second floors of his property, he decided it was high time to modernize the cellar. So, heading down below, Brannick12 began peeling back the walls of his 1940s property. At first, there wasn't much to see, just a few random names and faces scribbled on the wall, perhaps the children of a previous owner making their mark. In any case, next up was tackling the basement ceiling. Of course, pulling out all the material to reveal the original beams created a whole lot of mess, but out of the imploding dust cloud, something hidden in one of the wooden panels caught Brannick12's beady eye. Yes, carefully tucked away between two beams was a green and gray tin box. And while obviously itching to find out what it contained, Brannick12 was also keen to share the discovery online. Writing on Imgur, he reported, "Cool, a treasure. I must document this for Imgur. It's about time I contributed to the community." But what was inside the dusty box? And would its contents actually contribute to his life in some way? Well, removing the mysterious object from the beams, he took it outside for closer inspection. He was soon joined by his wife, too, and the curious couple made a breathtaking discovery that would change their lives forever. Tied together by a piece of string, the box was in almost perfect condition. It did, however, have some wear and tear on the handle, perhaps from the previous owner carrying it around. At this point, though, the couple didn't care. They just wanted to know what was inside. But somewhat oddly, Brannick 12 then decided to search his home for a banana. No, his discovery hadn't made him suddenly hungry. In fact, he was trying to find another object to place aside the box for a size comparison. Unfortunately, though, he only managed to find what looks like a baby-sized banana toothbrush. Still, it helped him to document the whole process. Anticipating its contents, Brannick 12 theorized on Imgur as to what the box would reveal. He wrote, "It has something a pretty penny, hidden away for ages, perhaps even decades." In fact, as Brannick 12 later explained in a post-comment, the first owner of the 1940s house was a lady in her 50s. So, could she have left a little something inside the box, packed it away, and forgotten about it? Whatever the case, Brannick 12 found that the contents were wrapped in a sheet of vintage newspaper. Dating from 1951, this page of the Cleveland Plain Dealer featured a 50s pinup being taught how to bowl with the help of some dapper-looking guys. Classic advertising straplines claimed that a light smoke is better for you, and that baldness can be prevented. Although historically interesting, the newspaper wasn't actually the star find, however. That's because behind it lay 3 packages, each individually wrapped in wax paper. And the green tinge coming through the wax definitely hinted at the prospect of a stack of dollar bills. In fact, Brannick 12 feverishly predicted the discovery on Imgur. He wrote, "There's money in here. I'm guessing $1,000 or more. Is that a all?" He wrote, "There may be a couple $1,000s here. We're freaking out. This doesn't happen to us." But the couple's good luck was only just beginning. Unwrapping the next package, they found that it didn't contain $20 bills. No, lucky for them, it was in fact filled to the brim with $50, $20,000. Could these be rare?
Okay.
If that were the case,
So you
there was a
get the
good chance
point.
that some bills
Okay.
may actually be worth more than their face value.
Sorry.
So after spending the following week getting the bills appraised and speaking with lawyers about what to do next, Brannick went back to work in the basement. And just as he thought his excitement was wearing off, he discovered another box tucked away in the ceiling. What were
Okay, so you get the point. The point is that with when you do renovations, when you tear down your home, you never know what you're going to find. You could find thousands and thousands of dollars stored there by the previous owner. What the law requires of you is I'm not aware. I don't know. You probably have a moral obligation to contact the previous owner. But what if there is no previous owner? And what if it didn't belong to the previous owner? What if it belonged to owners before that? And so we all experience that from time to time. As I said, in the most banal way, whether it's a piece of wallpaper, vintage something, or something more. So there's a deep theme here. The theme is, what do you discover in the home? And from the blight of the affliction of molds and fungus in your home, there's possibly something positive that can come out of it. I'm just give you one more aggregate of things. There's tons of these stories on the internet. Here's just another. This is not a video. This is just an article which has some interesting finds. Okay, so here's someone. Hidden treasures people found at home. Okay, centuries-old mystery may be solved soon thanks to some old pirate booty recently unearthed by an amateur historian. Found coins. People use metal detectors. They search for these things in walls and their thing, and they find stuff. Rhode Island. For 400 years, historians have pondered the escape route of pirate Captain Henry Every after his capture from a ship belonging to an Indian emperor carrying gold and silver from Mecca. The discovery of these coins hints that Every made a pit stop in America, although Bailey originally believed the loot to be of Spanish or colonial Massachusetts origin. Research revealed it was from 17th century Yemen. Not every treasure hunter has to leave home to excavate history. Some of the most significant and valuable discoveries have been made accidentally in people's own backyards, basements, and attics. Here are some of the most amazing, richest people have unearthed on their very own property. Rare art in a dilapidated house, okay? Works from a renowned artist, okay? Restoration and sale. The Saddle Ridge Hoard. Walking the dog can be the best part of the day, even if it's just in your own backyard. It's a great way to get some fresh air. If you're extremely lucky, $10 million worth of vintage American gold coins. That was the good fortune of an unnamed couple from Sierra Nevada in 2013. Largest collection of gold coins ever discovered. And that was found in someone's house, fermenting for 100 years. When a contractor calls you saying that they found something in the middle of a job, it's usually bad news. That was not the case for Mary Shaughnessy of Minneapolis In an attempt to add central air to her home, her contractor caught a whiff of something else. Hidden inside the wall was a stash of liquor and wine that was almost 100 years old by the time the contractors found it in 2010. Some bottles held a liquor tax label from a couple of years before Prohibition started, as seen here. Okay, booze. Hidden Norman Rockwell found in someone's home. Deception and divorce. As the story goes, Dave's father, cartoonist Don Trapp, bought the original painting for $900. His sons theorized that Don made a copy, etc. And this is Norman Rockwell that they saved for the hid because of a divorce. And vintage comics and a long lost work of art and Dracula movie posters and all sorts of interesting things that you can find in your home if you kind of look. The Hackney hoard, more coins, and hidden from Nazis. So this is here. This is in 2007. Terence Castle set out to build a new pond for his property in the Hackney borough of London. When the landscapers began to dig, they came across something he wouldn't expect in English soil: more than $1 million worth of American gold. Terence alerted the Portable Antiquities Scheme and the British Museum. Turns out the coins had belonged to the Sulzbachers, a German Jewish family that had settled there and buried the gold during World War II in fear that Nazi soldiers would ransack local banks. Although 5 family members knew of the location, all 5 perished during the war. However, a member of the extended Sulzbacher family did step forward to claim the hoard of $20 American double eagles. They sold at auction for $154,000. Some of the profit went to the discoverers of the hoard and to a local historian connected the discovery to the Sulzbacher family. A Van Gogh found in an attic, and more things like that. So what I want to say is that there is actually a reason why the Midrash picks up on this. And the Midrash picks up on this is not only because we are fascinated by this, but our ancestors had a similar fascination. And that the idea that a home can contain residues of the past and perhaps even treasures, no matter how old that home was, I think is a fascinating idea. And so embedded in the whole story of demolishing your home because of fungus is the potential to discover treasure and the potential to look at the world through a new set of glasses. The reason why I was drawn to this is because, when I was in Israel, I went through bookstores and always looking for interesting things. This book is called Parasha Biktana. Little summaries of the Parsha, okay? And I'll read a little in Hebrew and translate. And this is Rabbi David Stav. He's a fairly liberal Orthodox rabbi. He says, Kavanat Hamidrash Vehatorah. The intention of this Midrash and this portion, L'sagel et ha'adam lihishtamesh b'mishkafayim chadashim. That it's almost to orient a person to use new lenses, new glasses, livchinat hasarot habaot alav kifrat v'chevra. You want to orient a person to see disaster, misfortune with a different set of eyes. We would use the expression, when bad things happen to you, it's one thing to kind of, wallow in the sense of misery, but maybe the Midrash is saying, it's not the worst thing in the world when you lose your house to fungus. Okay, so you have to train yourself to look at this. He says, "Kasher mitrageshet aleinu tzara hame'aletzet otanu lefarek et beitenu." When we experience the kind of misfortune that forces us to, take apart our homes, efshar likanes lelachatz ulihysteria. You can easily get into a sense of real stress and hysterics. Okay. Leyeush v'la'atzvut, and go into a real torment and depression. Uvi'ikar liftoch mirirut v'chas, and you can get very bitter and very angry fairly easily when you experience misfortune, especially around your house, because you have no control over it. It's so frustrating when these things happen. So he says, you can take this out. You're going to take this out on people that you live with, right? Al mi, who are you going to take it out on? Al atzmeinu, on ourselves. Al ben azug, on your partner. V'ulai ala yeladim v'ala medina. And you're going to take it out on your children and also on the country, on the state, okay? HaTorah melamedet, the Torah teaches us, ki ma'achorei kol nega ufega babayit, that behind every single blight and blemish on your house, mistater otzar hatamun ben kirotav, there possibly is a hidden treasure in the walls. Lo tamid b'otzar yiyu davka kesef v'zahav. You're not always going to find gold and silver there. Efshar sheyiyu bo tovanot chadashot l'chayim. But you might instead get a new understanding of life, some wisdom. Shemishkalan v'chashivotehen gdolim elef monim mizahav v'chesed. That their importance is actually outweighs gold and silver by thousands. Lo tamid yiyu lanu cheshek. We don't always have the strength and the ability. We don't always have the ability to really understand the wisdom that emerges from a period of suffering or misfortune. But we know that sometimes there is a treasure that is hidden there. And he goes on in this direction. And of course, he does push up against, there's an absurdity to that too, because, how much misfortune is necessary for how much wisdom. And of course, nobody wants to experience misfortune for the sake of wisdom. His point is, like all of our points, anyone would say this after living a life, which is misfortune is going to happen to us. We're all going to experience either blight in our homes or worse. And so we can wallow in pain and self-pity and anger and bitterness, or we can use what emerges from that, in terms of wisdom to rethink our lives and to look at our lives differently. Now, of course, there are, not every thing is the equivalent of a house fungus, and there are calamities that one doesn't recover from so easily. But in the course of life, these things visit us, and so here I focused on this passage because there's a certain, it's an abnormality, the blight on a household, but it's also within the course of human events, or the course of life, that these kinds of minor calamities do happen. And when minor calamities happen, you have to figure out how to remediate them. Simply today we say, you call your plumber, you call your mold removal specialist. It's a pain, in the tuchus to do all of this. It costs a lot of money, but you do it, and sure enough, you paint it over, you rebuild it, and if you're fortunate, sometimes it could be a lot lovelier than it was. And from that, you learn a lesson that is much more valuable than the thousands of dollars that are, stuffed into your wall, or the Norman Rockwell, or the silver or gold hoards, etc. Those things, I think, captivate our imagination. They still do. The internet is filled with these kinds of stories of people who find stuff in their house while they're renovating and other kinds of things. And I looked at a video of someone literally pulling out a concealed box of old ancient coins from a wall. And, we have a particular association with this because of the Holocaust, where, people doing running away, stored things, buried treasure, buried things, buried belongings. And there's an entire wealth of material on this idea, which is that people running away didn't know what to do and had the hope of returning. The whole Oneg Shabbat archive from the Warsaw Ghetto is based on that idea, where people stuffed all sorts of archival materials. They buried it in some yard on the anticipation that someone would survive and dig it up, and someone did survive, and they did dig it up. And I assume that what's going on even in Ukraine today, where you have 4 million refugees, some of whom thinking that, we'll get back to our home one day, but we don't want, we can't take everything with us. So where are we going to put our valuables? Where are we going to put our jewelry? We're going to travel with all of our jewelry. We could, we live in a time when you could buy a lot of cryptocurrency and take your currency out of the country by simply having it electronic. I don't understand a lot of it, but I guess that's the idea, right? And how do you protect your possessions when an invading army is coming and could actually destroy or occupy your domicile? And so that's it. You have the hope that you're going to return, and that's what the Midrash has inside it. This idea that you could actually benefit from a fungal eruption in your home. Okay, that's to put a good light on it. Alana, go ahead.
I remember in Israel many years ago, before we had safe deposit boxes in the bank, or people didn't want to put it there, they used to put it under the balata, but
under the tile
on the floor. They used to raise, I don't know, how do you say balata?
A floor tile.
Tile, right, under the floor, and put money there and cover it. And sometimes they forgot which balata it was, so they had to search for it for a while.
That's right. So imagine that, and so if everybody does it, they all know that it's there. So imagine you going in to renovate an apartment in Tel Aviv or whatever, and you're digging up the floor, which is what everyone does, and then you find, oh my God, there's hundreds of dollars, hundreds of shekel, hundreds of lirot. It would have been more than anything, not shekels. I don't think it's back to mandate times or British whatever time. Yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions? This was good. So go ahead, Bob. Yeah.
I just want to, can you hear me? Yeah. I just want to say I really like the presentation, particularly of how spiritual mold can become spiritual treasure, if you will, how curses become blessings, how positive things can emerge. It reminds me of something I used to teach our medical students and younger doctors, that you need to think about onions. And when you cut or peel onions too quickly, rather than a layer at a time, everyone cries. And so to me, as you present this, the walls of the house is one layer of the onion, the clothes is yet another layer, the skin is yet another layer, and all of these things begin to show up in different ways, but can become positively transformative.
Absolutely. That's very, very valuable. Yeah, there's lots of ways to look at it, and there is a spiritual dimension to all of this. That's very, very valuable. Okay, so just I'm going to pause here.